It's the RNCM's annual Holocaust Memorial Day Research Forum, and in a moment I'll introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Gila Flam. Holocaust Memorial Day actually falls today, marking 76 years to the day when Auschwitz was liberated by the Allies, and there are thousands of worldwide remembrances recalling the atrocities of Hitler's Third Reich and more recent genocides. A basic tenet of Judaism is the act of remembrance, zachor in Hebrew. And I think it's especially appropriate that a world-leading conservatoire like ours should engage in this annually when we consider that countless Jewish musicians were murdered during the Holocaust, and as we also recall those émigrés who survived and who so enriched the post-war musical scene in the UK. I mentioned, for example, the singer Vera Roja, who taught at the RNCM and whose first husband, the composer Laszlo Weiner, was murdered. Of those composers and performers who didn't survive, Victor Ullmann, Hans Krasser, Pavel Haas, Erwin Schulhoff, Ilse Weber, Ferenc Weiss, Sandor Kuti, Bernard Kaff, Egon Ledetz, Raphael Schechter, the list goes on, and the focus of my research, 25-year-old Gideon Klein, we honor them today. May their memory be a blessing. Without wishing to make her blush, Dr. Gila Flam is world-renowned in her own field of musicology, and she joins us today from Israel. Born in Haifa, Gila is director of the music department and sound archives of the National Library of Israel in Jerusalem, where she developed the world's largest collection of manuscripts and recorded sound of Jewish and Israeli music. And having visited her department, I can testify that this collection is not only overwhelming in what it encompasses, but that its climate-controlled environment is the coldest place I've ever visited in Israel. Gila is a graduate of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where she studied musicology, Hebrew literature, Jewish folklore, modern history and theatre. She continued with her doctoral studies at UCLA, and her dissertation on the songs of the Lodz Ghetto was later published in a book, Singing for Survival, Songs of the Lodz Ghetto, published by University of Illinois Press. Gila established the ethnomusicology archives of the US Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, DC. In Israel, she continues to teach in several colleges and universities, including the Jerusalem Academy for Music and Dance, and she's the author of articles on Yiddish songs, Israeli music, and music archiving. Gila, it was fascinating to hear your postgraduate seminar earlier this afternoon, and it's great to have you with us to hear your presentation, Yiddish Songs from the Ghettos as a Mirror of Jewish Culture During the Holocaust. The screen is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I want to add to your introduction that we remember the Holocaust today and what happened to many people, many victims. But the Holocaust was not was in a way in a chain of things that happened in history. And the reason I called my talk Mirror is I want to show that even during the Holocaust, people looked back to the history of the Jewish people, of other peoples before the Holocaust. And today, when we look back to the Holocaust, we also mirror the Holocaust in the light of other events that happened to the Jewish people before the Holocaust. And the reason I begin with that is because in Yiddish, which the songs you're going to hear are in Yiddish, we don't use the word Holocaust or the word Shoah, which is the Hebrew word. We use the word Churban, or Churban in Yiddish. It's a Hebrew word which was developed to describe the destruction of the first temple, the second temple. And in the Bible, it appears several times when the Jewish people lost the land, lost their people, and experienced Churban, I won't say a Holocaust, but experienced a disaster, and they continued, in spite of this disaster, to create and to live and to manifest their being in art. And many scholars of literature had shown that how authors during the Holocaust and after the Holocaust refer to other events in Jewish history through text. In music, it's more complicated because music is an abstract language and melodies can travel from one place to another place. But the complex of words and music and context, which I talked about before, are the meaningful manifestations of culture that we should remember and we should acknowledge when we talk about the Holocaust. So that's my introduction. And another point I wanted to make is I refer to the word mirror according to Victor Turner's words, who says that mirrors in cultures are genres of cultural performance, are not simple mirrors but magical mirrors of social reality. They exaggerate, invert, reform, magnify, minimize, discolor, recolor, even deliberately falsify chronicled events. So this is the complex way I would like to introduce to you a few songs from my own research and from other sources of Holocaust, of what we call now Holocaust songs. Now I do this. Okay. No, I'll skip this. Maybe we'll come back to it. Okay. My research was on the songs of the Lodz Ghetto, and I touched upon this song earlier in my lecture, but here I would like to play you the hit song of the Lodz Ghetto, which is called Rumkowski Chaim. And in each verse, it has reference to the past of the Jewish history, Jewish folklore, Jewish movements, political movements, Zionism against anti-Zionism, and reflection of the events of the Lodz Ghetto. The main character is Rumkowski Chaim here. It's a song about the head of the Judenrat, the Beirat in Lodz Ghetto. And the song is actually about hunger, death, but it has hope at the end. And in many lectures that I give to people in Israel that tend to look at Holocaust as death, I tell them that there was life, A, during the Holocaust, and B, there was hope. When you think of, when you're very sad and very hungry, that's what Holocaust survivors told me, you don't sing a sad song. You sing a happy song, because the tragedy is already there. So if you want to comfort yourself, why sing a sad song? You can sing a happy song to make yourself better, to make yourself feel better. And this is what music can do and language cannot do. Literature cannot always do. Painting also can do. You can paint your dreams, but in order to paint, you need a pencil and you need a paper. And in order to sing, you don't need anything. So in this song, which I will play you now, 3 verses, you will hear, I can see, I don't think I gave you the translation. You will hear the word Chaim, meaning life. Orthodox Jews in Israel, when they hear the song, it reminds them, it recalls them the blessing of the beginning of the month, Rosh Chodesh. In the beginning of the month, we have a special prayer that we say, God, please give us a life full of health, which is very relevant to all of us now, full of parnasa, well-being, good things. And the word Chaim goes, give us Chaim shel parnasa, Chaim shel simcha, Chaim, 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 Chaim. That's a blessing. That's a good day. That's a celebration, actually. The beginning of the month is sort of a small celebration in Jewish calendar. And here, the street singer of the Lodz Ghetto, which was established in 1940 and opened in the 1945. And during the first 2 years, it was sort of calm. Later, there was deportation to Chelmno, and then 43, 44, it was calm until the final liquidation, 1944, to Auschwitz. So this is the street singer of the Lodz Ghetto, Yankele Hershkovitz, who actually survived the ghetto and lived in Poland and committed suicide in 1964. And I recorded Yaakov Rotenberg, a man who was born in 1925, and I met him in Israel and recorded him then. And just listen to the sound and to the repetition of the word Chaim.
Mir alasanen gebench mit Chaim, Chaim leolam ufes. Chaim fen beisa Chaim, Runkas Chaim mit sein Größennes. Macht dich nicht immer jeden Tag so gewaltig schreien, oi, oi, oi. Jede eine fragt, a zweite Schale, oi. Sogt der Chaim, es gibt das oi. Chaim Weizmann hat gesagt, will die Jiden in Palästina haben. Gott sei geheißen, Acker sehen, Gott sei dort die Bagruben. Aber in sich Chaim, Urem, Koski Chaim, geht uns jeden Tag schreien. Eine Mastig Bräut, in zweiten Mastig verhört, Melik Barei, Moyech, tiefen Brett. Der dritte Chaim, von Beisa Chaim, hat mit Malchem Hofissa Geschäft gemacht. Soll ihm stellen bei Sim, was mehr. Soll ihm stellen bei Tag, bei Nacht. Hat der Malchem Hofis genommen, sie die Arbeit schnell, macht den Geber ein Zweiatel. Macht es flink, macht es geht, macht die ganze Welt schwach in mir. Weil es in sich Chaim, geht ins Klein, geht ins Graupen, geht ins Wein. Verzeihtens haben damit bewiesen gegessen, man, hinter schon jeder weiter Mann. Rumkoski Chaim hat getracht, die Arbeit für bei Tag bei Nacht. Gemacht a Ghetto in a Dieta, in schreit Gewalt, ist geracht. Immer sind wir so gewesen, ist mir alles seinen Gebench mit Chaim, mir alles seinen Gebench, mir.
Okay, I just
Mir alles seinen Gebench mit Chaim, mir alles seinen Gebench.
Okay. There are two more verses, and I just wanted to point out what he's talking about. He's talking about hunger. He talks about dieto. It sounds diet, but it's not diet. It was actually a store for food that Rumkowski, who was corrupted and wanted to be protected by the Jews, who really saw him as the one to blame for all their suffering. He established a food store for people who were sort of sick, and anybody who got tickets for the store could get better food. So he established a ghetto with a food store, but we all do oi, oi, oi. If somebody says oi in Yiddish, in Jewish, is not a word, it's a whole world. Okay? When you do oi, 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 and so oi means we suffer and we complain. And then he says he made a ghetto and he promised us that it will be good and we will be free soon. And meanwhile, we are very weak and sick. And the other thing he says, he promised us to make a nest. A nest means a miracle. And from the first two lines, we have the analogy for every Jew. When he hears nest, he has Moses in his mind. Here is a leader, and it's a wishful thinking. We would like him really to be a leader like Moses led us in the desert and brought us food. So this is a mirror of an old culture archetype, Exodus, which is like the most symbolic one. And we have many songs that refer to Exodus in the ghetto. And at the same time, comment on the events, on the hunger, on the ill politics of Rumkowski, and on Chaim, which are death. And then he says, second Chaim is Chaim Weizmann. Chaim Weizmann was the Zionist leader, was one of the heads of the Zionist movement. And he promised to bring us to Palestine. He was a leader, he believed in Zionism, but he is no good either, because when he brought us to Palestine, we heard the Jews complaining, oy vey, again, because they had to work hard and it was very difficult. So here again, in spite of the ghetto circumstances, the singer is not a Zionist. It's a very, very negative view on Zionism and Chaim Weizmann. So Zionism is not a solution. So and then comes Chaim, der dritter Chaim, the third Chaim. The third Chaim, he has no last name. He works very hard. He puts death, he brings dead people, corpse to the cemetery, and he is working with the angel of death. So this is again witnessing to the events of the Lodz ghetto, of really people dying in the streets of hunger. And Chaim, der dritter Chaim, is Chaim Petrovkovsky, is a historical person. He was the undertaker of Lodz. And in between, in the refrain, he also says Chaim gives us shiraim. Another thing that echoes or mirrors Jewish folklore. Shiraim is coming from the Hasidic tradition, that the rabbi sits around a big tish, a big table, with his Hasidim, with his people, and he eats from a challah, usually it's a bread, and he gives everyone a piece of bread. It's an act of sharing, an act of holiness, an act of healing. But the word shiraim is also leftovers. So he uses a symbolic word to describe to describe leftovers. So the choice of words is very, very sophisticated in a very simple song, in a very catchy song, in a very sort of light Jewish melody song that you can sing along. And this is the description of, or the essence of Lodz Ghetto at the beginning of the ghetto in 1941. And this singer is not educated in music. He was a tailor. He was like a troubadour, like the border singers, a tradition that we also have in Jewish culture since the late 19th century, since the Enlightenment, that there were singers, border singers, we call them, that used to go from one place to another and sing secular songs. So here is this tradition, and it's more of a cabaret, and he sings this to people and he expresses their feelings. It's sort of a cabaret. It's not a very intimate song. It's a song about commenting about the events, talking about death with the words of life, referring to the Bible, referring to Hasidic manners, and referring to modern Jewish politics. So in one very little 2-minute song, you have witnessing, commenting, and hope that once you have this underlying, and every Jew has it in his background, he has it in his subconscious, and the melody and the words take you to another word and another world, and you can get you can be comforted with this complex scene of the Lodz Ghetto, in spite of the fact that it describes that.
Ich fucka Palestine, dorten is a golden Meline. Ich will kischen die Messise hindel, wo ne scheint. Ich will sich peuveln in de Mikve, jeden Tag sing in die Tikve. Ich will pflanzen Pomeranzen, so wird sein alle reit. Ich will wehren Dose in die Gile. Menschen es recken kischen die Twilem. In Rebirschke Kalbe wird sein unser Freund. Servus Iden, ich fuhr heim. Den Ove Minske Gass, oi oi, de Sochrim sennen bloß, oi oi oi. Alle sennen Heinchen pleite, sie dich nicht kein Spaß. Robin mit de Sien, dort dahin. Goldmann mit de 7 Techte, Mäusche, Ficke, Schmiel. Rumkaske mit seiner Mei. Willen kann sich alle rein, mit wir haben im Polken a ganze Zeit, Hagedille wird sein alle reit. Ich verkap a ganze Zeit, Hagedille wird sein alle reit. Ich verkap Palestine, dorten is a goldene Medine, ich will kischen die Messise hindel, wo ne scheint. Will sich peulen in de Mikve, jeden Tag in de Tikve. Ich will pflanzen Pomeranzen, so wird sein alle reit.
Okay, so the other song, this song is more of the same as the first one. And again, he has many references to Jewish manners and to Zionism. He says, I go to Palestine. It's a wonderful country. It will be all right. He uses English. And this is to comment. He sings in Yiddish, but they were not disconnected from the world. Even Jews in Lodz knew few words in English, and definitely they knew some words in Hebrew if they were Zionist, and Polish, and maybe other languages. And this is a commentary that it's not a Zionist song, but it's sort of we will we will go on and we will be free, and we will be behind the ghetto walls soon. So it's the same folk song like Runkowski Chaim, and also it builds on a rumor system, or rumors that were going on in the ghetto, because in the ghettos there were no radio, no newspapers. So everybody says, oh, Chaim Runkowski wants to go to Palestine. Maybe he will get us visas to Palestine. We'll be able to go to Palestine. There are other songs that say he has contact with another Judenrat, and maybe we'll go there. As long as we can dream of going somewhere else, we'll think about it and it will comfort us. I don't know if I have time for this one, but I would like to talk about another song from Lodz before we leave Lodz. And this is a song that the same singer, Yankele Hershkovitz, and the same singer, Yaakov Rotenberg, sings. It's a medley which begins with the word kämpfen. Kämpfen is fight, is reveal. And the reason I want to talk about this song is because the person who sang to me the songs asked me, don't you ask me why we in Lodz, we didn't have an uprising, we didn't rebel, we didn't do anything against the Nazis or against the Judenrat. You don't ask me these questions. I thought you're a historian. Everybody's asking us, why did we sit so quiet? Why didn't we do anything? So I want to tell you, we had a hero in the ghetto. His name was Yankele Hershkovitz, which is the singer who composed these songs. And he stood in the middle of the streets of Lodz and did this thing, kämpfen, we have to fight. So here is the uprising of the Lodz ghetto, are the songs of this singer in the ghetto, while Runkowski could listen to him and arrest him, and indeed he was arrested later, and other composers were arrested by Runkowski also in 1942. And this is our fight, this song. And I want to play you this song, and I don't know if you can see the words, but
Men darf zu kämpfen, stark zu kämpfen, hoi als der Arbeit, der soll nicht laden, leut, men tun nicht wagen, noch hacken schaben, hoi wird der Heies gringe, kriegen ein Stückchen Bräut. Mer den neue Kaiser, Herr Isaita heißer, stammt in kleinem Städtel, hat Mut gegatt a Bettel, sucht den Zieh zu geben, men es alles noch der Leben, Peulen bad dem Jecke, mit der Leppen in die Gette. Soll nicht laden, Leut, men tun nicht wagen, noch hacken schaben. Heu wette, heies gringe, kriegen a Stückchen Bräut.
okay, he says we have to fight, we have to break glasses and windows, because then he will hear us and let us go. Now, the beginning of the song, which is the refrain, the kämpfen, the fighting, is actually a socialistic song. It's a song of the working class who want civil rights and equal rights in the times before the war. So it's a socialistic song that got new meanings during the Holocaust and became a symbol of the uprising and the freedom of expression and the freedom of the in terms of Lodz that they were dreaming that they will have. So again, it's a hope song, it's a fighting song, and it survived with this movement of the hand. And this song I want to play you because it refers to a very popular Yiddish folk song. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Yiddish folk songs. And it comes from the Kovna ghetto.
brennt a Feuer und die Schreck ist groß. Es kommen jederlich von die Brigadelech, von jedem Gesicht schweiß. So soll ich weitergehen, sie soll ihr bleiben stehen. Ich weiß nicht wer nun wo, da kommen dann alle in grüne Mann alle. Er nimmt doch alles zu. Der kommen dann alle in grüne Mann alle. Er nimmt doch alles zu. Milch von Fendalle, Speck von Kendale, und jeder Lachmann brennt. Alles scheiet alle, Geld von Bayet alle. Habt als von die Hand. Ich habe
Okay, so this song, this one is based on a very, very famous Yiddish song from 1900. It's called Oifen Pripychek. It's called Near the Fireplace. Near the fireplace, children sit and learn their Aleph base. And it became very popular, was composed by Mark Warshawski and got the blessing of the famous author Shalom Aleichem. It was a whole discussion between Warshawski and Yoel Engel and Shalom Aleichem. What is a folk song? Because it has been composed. But anyway, there is a scene, there is a picture in the folk song, a picture of a cheder, of a small room where a rabbi and children are learning Torah, learning the Bible, and there is a fireplace. It sits in every Jewish sort of cultural stock. And here is a singer who was recorded by Shmerke Kaczerginski in 1948 for the Historical Commission of Munich. And there is a whole picture of a fireplace at the gate with a Nazi who checks everything that the Jews are trying to smuggle into the ghetto of Kovno. And the description is very detailed. It takes from them the wood, it takes from them the milk, it takes from them other food, potatoes. So this is what we call in music, and we know it throughout music history, parody or contrafact. You take one word or one scene and you build a new song that witnesses the situation of a special place, and at the same time, it gives you another level of memory, of consciousness, of unconsciousness, and comforting through the melody, because the original melody and the original song runs simultaneously with the new parody. So it gives you more meaning and more power to the song, and it has a lot of humor also in this. Okay, and I have more time. Okay, maybe I will just want to see if this one. Now, this song is from, as I said, from Vilna Ghetto. I talked about it before. But here I think I have a recording from the Historical Commission that Kaczerginski had.
Rilling, הגטוליק, מחבר קצ'רגינסקי, מוזיק אברמו ברודנו, gesungen ומחבר. Ich blonde im Ghetto und Ghetto zu Ghetto und kenne ich vielen Kino. Nicht ist mein Lieber, wie trockt man rüber, Menschen aus Obschot Schavon. Es leuchtet auf mein Heimig, der Himmel, der Bläue, wo der Hobby ist der Fund. Ich stehe wie ein Bettler bei jedem Feuer und betul ein bisschen und oh, Frühling. Nimm zu mein Treue und bring meine Liebste, mein Treue zu ihm. Frühling, auf deine Flügelbläue und nimm meine Hand mit und bring es zu mein Lieb. Frühling auf deine Flügelbläue und nimm meine Hand mit und bring es zu mein Lieb. Ich gehe zu der Arbeit.
Okay, in this song, Kaczorginski, who sings his own song to this tango melody, refers a little bit to Jewish culture, but more to the general culture. It's about spring. It's about love. We're also part of the world. Spring will bring us back the love. Our loved ones will bring us optimism, the sun, and we'll be back as we used to be. So this is more a naturalistic song, which is very European. It exists in all cultures. And with the tango melody, which was composed in the Vilna Ghetto for the theater, again, we see how the Jews were part of the world and also cut from the world in this particular time. And I don't know if I have time for that, but I would like to finish this presentation. So we went through Lodz and Kovna and Vilna, and we heard street songs, theater songs, another folk song. I touched upon the sources that we have, my own recordings, the recordings Kaczorginski made in 48, and some other anthologies that were published. The repertoire is not huge. And I show you how words and music are referring to the history before the Holocaust. And you look back and you look forward. Forward, we'll get freedom again, and backwards, we had our own life. We had freedom, we had culture, we had manners, we had not always we were rich or very educated, but we are part of a nation, part of a culture, part of people. And we are cut out now in these ghettos, but we will survive. And I wanted to finish with this Hebrew song, which was composed in 1944 by David Zehavi, who is considered to be the first Israeli-born composer, who also composed the song Eli Eli, if you know, by Hannah Senesh. And the words are by Fania Bergstein. Fania Bergstein was immigrated to Palestine at the end of the 1930s. And in 44, she hears that all her family vanished in Europe. And she writes this song, which is called Nigunim. Nigunim means melodies. Nigunim also refers to Hasidic culture of Nigunim, of textless melodies that they sing together. And they believe that music will uplift them and bring them closer to God, Dvekut. It's a whole Kabbalistic belief of the Hasidim. So she sits in a kibbutz and hears about what happens, and she writes a song which says, you put the melodies in my heart, the melodies of my father and my mother and my grandfather and my grandmother. This you put in your heart, you rooted in my heart, and this will go with me forever and ever and ever. And these melodies will become like a new tree that will create new life in new melodies. And this song is very popular in Israel, and not too many people think it's a Holocaust commemoration or memorial song. It's about the nature of traditional melodies to go on from generation to generation. And one more word about David Zehavi. Although he was born in Israel, in Palestine, and later he lived in Kibbutz Na'an, he came from a Hasidic family that became later socialistic, and he lived in a kibbutz. So I would like to end with this mirror of an Israeli or Palestinian Jew who lost her family in 1944 and thinks that what will always remain are the melodies, the music.
שתלתם ניגונים באמי ואבי, ניגונים מזמורים שכוחים, גרעינים גרעינים נס העם לבבי, עתה הם עולים וצומחים, עתה הם שולחים פורות בדמי, שורשיהם באורכי שלובים, ניגונך אבי ושירייך אמי, ודופקי נאורים ושבים. הנה אז הנה שיר ארצי הרחוק, הביע פיהם אלי בת, הנה לי תזהרנה בדמע ושחוק, איכה וזמירות של שבת, כל הגה איתם וכל צליל ייעלם, בקולכם הרחוק כי יהום, הנה אצום והריני איתכם, מעל לחשכת התהום.
He says, I will close my eyes and I will be with you beyond the darkness of the world. So thank you very much. And I'll be happy to hear your comments or questions.
Thank you so much, Gila, for that fascinating and in many ways a very moving presentation as well. I think there are some questions coming in. Agnes has a question. I don't know, Agnes, do you want to unmute yourself and ask it, or do you want me to ask it on your behalf? If you unmute yourself, I know what the answer is. No, she's shaking her head. So Agnes says, Gila, did you say that the composer of this song, that's the last song you played, also composed the Hannah Shener's song, or have I misheard you?
And we have his archives in our library, and I think what made Eli Eli so famous is the melody. And Eli Eli is connected to Hannah Senesh, which is connected to Second World War in Palestine and Europe. Yes, it's a beautiful song, and he also refers to Zmirot Shel Shabbat, to Sabbath melodies, and to the readings of Megillat Eicha. Don't know, you collect it. I don't know. You say it in English. Eicha. The
Lamentations.
No. Eicha is not lamentation. It's about Eicha who lost his family, and not Eov. Echa is about the destruction of the temple.
Job.
Not Echa is about the destruction of the temple. Yeah, maybe it's Lamentations. Yeah, so he refers even in this song, the Hebrew song. She says, I remember the song of my father and my mother. I remember the sounds of lamentations of the synagogue and the sounds of the songs of Shabbat. And this will always be with me, and this will always continue. So that's...
Thank you. Jane has a question.
Gila, thank you very much indeed. It was lovely to hear so many songs. I was interested that all but the last were sung accompanied, and clearly the last song is a modern recording. But would these songs from the Łódź Ghetto have been sung unaccompanied or with instruments? Are they sung now with instruments, and if so, which ones?
Yeah, so the songs of the Łódź Ghetto, I mentioned it before, were taken by a klezmer group called Brave Old World. And they have been performing them for the last 20 years and recording them with a klezmer sound accompaniment with Michael Alpert as a soloist. They also have been taken by another klezmer group called Clays Roim from Italy, from Roma. I don't know if they continue with this. And it's a very good question because I didn't speak to Michael Alpert for many years because of the accompaniment they gave the songs. And he said, this is my expression through these songs. I treat the songs not as an artifact of authenticity as they used to be sung in the ghetto, because he exaggerated, says, oh, so you have to starve me and you have to take my freedom, and then I will sing it like they sang it in the ghetto. He says, I am a young American professional musician. I want to express myself through these songs. And it's a wonderful question because I took these recordings to the survivors of the Łódź Ghetto here in Israel. And I even told them, here there is a wonderful klezmer group. Why won't you invite them for a Landsmannschaft commemoration? They have every year commemoration. And they said, it's not our songs. So that's a big question of cultural artifacts, and especially it's very relevant in music. And I heard few of the songs recently. A Polish scholar brought it to me. She made arrangements to choir, klezmer, and also with piano. I heard it. What I want to say is, as musicologists or ethnomusicologists, once you publish your work, it's not yours anymore. So that's what happens. But actually, Yankele Hershkovitz for few months sang with viola accompaniment. When the German Jews were brought into the ghetto, there was a viola player who accompanied him. There is a photo. And also in the Chronicles of the Łódź Ghetto, it's mentioned that he was singing in the streets with accompaniment. But the theater songs were sung with accompaniment, probably piano or whatever they had.
Thank you very much indeed. That's really helpful. Thanks.
I think Adam's next.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see if the songs are generally available in published editions. I mean, I'm very, very fond of this sort of area of music and would love to perhaps get my hands on some of them and do something with them, if I'm allowed to, that is.
So there is an anthology out of print in Yiddish of Kaczerginski, published in 1948. Maybe you can find it in libraries. It has 200 texts and 100 melodies at the back. They're not side by side. And Hanem Lotek from YIVO, we did a publication of about 40 songs from Kaczerginski, which is called Mir Sein and Do, and it's with chords and lyrics, singable lyrics in English and Yiddish and context notes. And it was published by the Workmen's Circle in New York, but I don't know now where you can get it. But it's called Mir Sein and Do, We Are Here. And I think that's, if you ask me, that's the best modern edition of these songs, but it's only 40 songs. And my book is available also, but it's only songs from the Lodz Ghetto and not with arrangements and not with a singable text.
Well, I'd be quite interested in songs that perhaps had less arrangement and, you know, one just had the melody, so you could perhaps do more with it.
Right. So
Yeah.
Kaczerginski has this wonderful book. If you don't have it, we'll scan it for you at the National Library.
Thank you. Kaczerginski, is it?
What?
Yeah, say the name again. Kaczerginski.
Kaczerginski.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Barbara.
Thank you for that. It was really, really fascinating. It's lovely to hear that the songs. About a year ago, just before lockdown, I went to our local theatre, the New Vic Theatre near where I live, and their outreach person was wanting to do a project with Adam Gobb and some of our composition students, and she had these resources, which I happen to have here by chance, and it's the children's story, the story of the children of the Lodz Ghetto, and she was keen to do some sort of project involving our composition students to set some of this to music. But I'd be interested if you could tell us more a bit about those children's stories and whether there are existing songs that were aimed particularly at children.
I don't know. There were many publications done on literature and history of the Lodz Ghetto recently. I don't know in particular about children's songs. I know that there were some street things, but not. I didn't get a full song of children, and children is really. I interviewed from Vilna people and asked them about their children's songs, not from Lodz. But in general, the whole concept of children's song is a modern one. It's just it's like like Israeli children's song. It's invented tradition. Children were not considered special part of the family unless they went to a particular school, and there they were taught, you know, either Hebrew Zionistic songs or Yiddish songs. And it's most of the children's songs that I know of are from the beginning of the 20th century, even close to the war, 1920s, 1910, and then American Yiddish songs. So for children. So I don't know.
It's just that these are wonderful stories, but also wonderful images, beautiful images that are full of symbolism, and it just be interesting to find whether they're, you know, in partly in response to Adam's question about what might.
And actually, in Lodz, as you know, in 1942, most of the children were deported to Chelmno, and there were no children surviving from the Lodz Ghetto. It's also true for Ponar, for Vilna. So I don't know how. I have an uncle who was still alive, who was 3 years in the Lodz Ghetto. When he was free, he was 8 years. But he says he doesn't remember anything because he was in hiding places. And what I did recall are not what you call children's songs, but more youth organization songs of youth, not of little children.
Thank you.
Gila, how willing or reluctant do you think the survivors were in the immediate post-war period to share these songs. I ask this because, of course, our engagement with Holocaust history and memory has shifted in the past 70 years or so. And we do know that a lot of survivors have only come forward in the past few years, say in the past 20 years or so. I mean, that's certainly true of my researches with regard to music in Terezin, where it's only since the 1990s and even more recently that survivors came forward with their testimony.
I think I experienced it when I began. They were very reluctant to sing to me. It brought to them memories, emotions, guilt feelings, and also some insults they experienced from historians or other people with an agenda that they wanted to get facts and did not get what they wanted. And it was not easy at all. I did my research, my fieldwork in America and in Israel. And there were many people that I used to come again and again and again and again. And finally I got one song. I mean, they liked my company, to say so, but they didn't want to sing songs. And I have this, I don't know if I have the time, but there was one man in Be'er Sheva, which is the south city in Israel, and I came to him from Haifa, which is the north. I took a bus maybe for 4 hours, which is a long distance in Israel. And I came to him and I said, I heard that you have a good voice and you were a counselor in a youth movement group. And you're the only one who can sing me the songs of the youth movement. So I said, are you nuts? Are you nuts? You came 4 hours, let's have breakfast. So he fed me breakfast. And then I said, do you want me to take you back to the bus station? He says, no, I came for something. I didn't come for breakfast to Be'er Sheva. It took me like several hours. I said, okay, so tell me your story. Tell me your story. Why, you know, these girls, I was beautiful, I was handsome, so they fell in love with me. I'm not anything special, you know, these girls and the teenagers, they see a man who's, you know, all the stories. And at the end, what he said to me is, I was in Zion. I was in Israel. I was in Palestine. I wasn't in Lodz. The songs I sang brought me to another world. But they're all Hebrew songs, you know, then we sing Czech songs, Polish songs, but maybe Hebrew songs that we learned through the Zionist leaders, counselors. But when I came home and I saw my parents and I saw how they suffer, how hungry they are, I felt guilty because I wasn't there to help them. And I was with the nonsense of the youth movement of singing songs or drinking and dancing with the young people. So they were very reluctant, and not always you could know why. But this was very, very strong. I still remember the meeting with him because he felt guilty that he was in the Lodz ghetto in Marishin singing Hebrew songs with all the girls admiring him because he had a good voice and he was very handsome. And he came home and he said, this is Lodz ghetto, not where I live. So there are many, many stories. And the man that sang me the Rumkovsky Chaim, he didn't want to sing to me. Also, he lived far away from where I am. And I came to him and said, let's have dinner. Okay. So then I said, and what now? I made you a cassette. I made you a cassette before you came. You have dinner, take the cassette and go home. And the reason he gave me the cassette is because he said, I didn't know if I can sing it to you because I will cry. And his wife stood next to him and said, it's not good for him to do that. I'm afraid that he will break down. So, and I think this, we have to remember that on one hand, we do wonderful things that we work with music, but as we know, it's very, very emotional and it's not always easy. And they were very reluctant. Many of them were very reluctant to sing to me. But once they opened up, this man wrote after my book, he wrote 4 or 5 books. When he retired around 70, he wrote until he died, 85, he wrote several books. And also I had another woman who sang to me, and after she sang to me, she decided to write her books and to write the story of her songs. So it goes, but it's not, I'm glad you say you experience it too, because I experienced it always also, and it's, and you know, when you're doing your research, I mean, you don't go to people to have lunch and dinner. Sometimes, yeah, you have to take it also with a grain of salt, you know. So you have your dinner with the man and you come again.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from anybody? No, I can't see any hands going up or people gesticulating. So, Gila, you presented as always a fascinating program, a wonderful forum now, and a great seminar earlier this afternoon. So many thanks indeed. And
Thank you very much.
I think you've really helped us in a very, very appropriate and moving way to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.